When putting together your application or personal statement, you generally want to focus on the positive, your strengths, accomplishments, successes. However, if you faced some extenuating circumstances that have negatively impacted your academic performance, that required you to maybe take some time off, or that otherwise created a gap in your work or education, it's usually worth making note of this in your application or essay. And in fact, some schools even have secondary essay prompts that give you space to explain such issues. Today, I want to give you some ideas for discussing these kinds of less than ideal circumstances. But first, hi, my name is Dr. Sarah Klebe, and I'm an admissions expert at BeMo. So sometimes life just happens. Many things are completely outside of our control, and we might have to set aside even really important things like work or study to be able to deal with unfortunate or negative circumstances. From illness and injury to mental wellness to crisis or personal catastrophe, there are any number of unforeseeable challenges that might result in our academic record looking less than pristine from the outside. If there's a significant gap or other potentially negative mark in your academic record, it's often better to tackle it head on rather than try to avoid it, gloss over it, or worse, try to hide it, which of course you should never do. Addressing the issue yourself allows you to take control of that narrative, offer a reasonable explanation, and turn a negative into a display of resilience. If you don't address it, then you leave the situation open to interpretation by the admissions committee, and you don't want them filling in those blanks for you. There are times when things just don't work out as planned, and that's okay. That's part of life. It's part of being human. Maybe you had to take a term off or a year off to deal with some personal issues. Maybe you failed an exam because of a long and serious illness, or maybe you failed an exam because you just messed up and didn't practice the way that you should have. If there's anything like this in your record that you feel needs explanation, then the personal statement is often a good place to do this. Again, some schools will have secondary essay prompts that will give you space to reflect on such things, but even so, you need to make sure that you get to the stage where secondaries are sent out for that to happen. And so that means potentially taking some time, not a ton of space, but some space in your personal statement to explain what happened. Now, in doing this, you really want to think carefully about what you say and how you say it. You don't want to beg for their consideration or their understanding. You don't want to give an emotional or overwhelmingly negative account, and you definitely don't want to make excuses. Rather, you want to be clear and straightforward about what happened and frame it in a growth mindset. And what that means is you own what happened, especially if it was a mistake or an error on your part. You be honest about it, and then you try to focus on the positive. Oftentimes, these challenges can be articulated in ways that highlight our resiliency, our adaptability, our capacity for improvement, our tenacity, and dedication to what we're doing. If you faced something like a personal illness or a tragedy that forced you to step away from school for a year, but then you returned and got a 4.0 in all of your courses after that, well, that is an amazing demonstration of just how resilient you are. However, you can only effectively contextualize this if you take control of that narrative rather than just assuming that the application reviewers are going to come to such a conclusion on their own. So, if you're thinking, well, they'll look at my transcripts and they'll see that my marks were all A's when I returned, well, think again. They might see that, but they might not make that connection either. And it's really important that you give them that connection. You don't want to leave something like that up to assumption or chance. So here's two of the most common kinds of issues and some ideas for approaching them. If you failed an exam, especially if you failed an exam because you weren't prepared for it, you would want to explain the circumstances around this, but again, don't try to make excuses for what happened. If you failed an exam, I'm sorry, that's usually on you, if it's because of lack of preparation and things like that. I've certainly not gotten great grades in the past. I'm sure I've failed an exam or test, and I had to own up to that mistake. And you need to do the same. Own that error, but show what you learned from the experience. So do not say something like, well, I had 3 exams in a week and 3 essays that were all due the night before this exam. That's just university. Every student has had to deal with that. It's not a good excuse, and a statement like that is not going to reflect positively on you. And so that's not what we want. Instead, again, own it. Discuss what you could have done better, how you used that strategy afterwards, why you're better for having gone through it. So, for example, saying something like, toward the end of my 2nd year, I was able to secure a spot in a few 3rd-year courses. However, I wasn't as prepared as I should have been for the kinds of rigors expected in 3rd-year courses. I took those courses because I was interested in them, but I learned that there is a significant jump in complexity between the sophomore and junior years at university. Because of this lack of knowledge, I didn't have the discipline and time management skills necessary to do well, and I failed my exam. However, I learned so much from this experience, and it gave me the push I needed to meet with my advisor and work out a rigorous study schedule, which left me much more prepared in all of my courses after this. That's the growth mindset. That's being mature, being professional, owning up, saying that you just weren't effectively prepared. There was more that you could have done, but you didn't. There were unknown unknowns that you couldn't account for, but you owned up to that mistake and you moved forward and you did better because of it. That's a great way to frame a failure like that. Another really common thing that some people have to do is take a significant leave of absence. When a leave of absence is necessary, it's usually due to personal circumstances, illness, death in the family, or some other catastrophic event. When giving an explanation around something like this, you don't have to go into deep detail about whatever it was that you went through or suffered. This is going to be something probably deeply personal, and you shouldn't feel pressured to disclose that kind of deeply personal information. Instead, give a brief, objective summary of what happened, note how long the absence was, and again, try to focus on the positive. So here's another example. In December of 2016, my mother lost a long and difficult battle with cancer. From that time until September 2017, I had to step away from school, both to grieve this loss and to travel back home to support my father as his only child. This was a difficult time that gave me a very personal window into the world of grief, something I hadn't really experienced prior. When I was able to return to school, I did so successfully, maintaining a 4.0 in all of my courses. And as an aspiring future physician, I feel that this experience taught me a lot about compassion and empathy. Our family and friends showed us so much love and care, and that lesson is one that I can take with me into my career, helping patients and their families deal with similar losses. Right, so a very obviously negative and difficult situation, but you don't have to go into, the details of what you went through, but try to, see what kind of meaning you can salvage from a negative experience like that. Whatever the situation is, The key is to own it, to state it plainly and honestly, and to focus on the positive, what you learned, how you grew, why you're a better person today for having gone through that experience, whether it was a catastrophic loss or crisis, an illness, or a personal failing. When you do this, you control that narrative and you control how your story will be viewed by others. So, I hope that you enjoyed this video and that it was helpful. If so, please do go ahead, like it, share it with a friend who might benefit from it, and be sure to follow us on whatever social media platform you're using right now. If you'd like us to help you, click on the link that should appear either above or below this video to see our programs and schedule a free initial consultation. We'll set you up with one of our admissions experts to answer any questions you might have and get you started on your preparations. We have programs to suit any of your needs, and we're always happy to work with you to determine which plan is going to support you and your goals most effectively. As ever, thank you so very much for your time. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.